Hi, my name's Peter. This is a channel about motorcycles and motorcycle camping, and especially the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, because that's the only bike that I own right now. So I've had this bike for a year. I've done over 10,000 kilometers on it. I released a video about its reliability, but this is really a video about the ownership experience, riding it both on and off-road, some of the modifications that I've made, as well as thinking about whether or not I would buy it again. As you can see, the bike has no problem with this slightly rough off-road situation. There's been a few people coming up here. Let's just find a place where I can stop and talk about the bike. Well, this looks like a good spot. Here's what you get when you ride down any road on the Sunshine Coast, probably most places in British Columbia. Somebody's camped up here and had a campfire. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the question of why I bought the Himalayan 450. For almost 3 years I had a Honda Africa Twin, and that was a great bike. I rode it on road, I took a lot of trips on it, and I really loved that bike. But for off-road, it was just a little bit too much for me to handle. So I made the decision to downsize to a Honda CRF 250L, which was much better off-road, but didn't have enough power and range for me to do the on-road adventure riding that I wanted to do. I could have had the 250 Rally, which would have given me more range, but still the same power. And it wasn't adequate for me to be able to ride on the highway. So when the Himalayan was announced, I was really excited. But there were some other bikes that I had to choose from. So I could have chosen the CF Moto 450, which I think is a great bike. Very similar price, very similar weight, and very similar in many ways. But I felt like that was more of an off-road focus, and this was going to be my daily rider. So I wanted a bike that I could handle in all situations. And that led me to lean towards the Royal Enfield. Still don't know if that was the right choice because I've never ridden the CF Moto 450, and lots of people love it. But you have to make a choice. I also considered buying a used KTM 390 Adventure. That's the older generation, but a friend suggested that the power range wasn't great for me. I'm not really like the kind of guy who rips the throttle a lot. I like to just plod along. So I like the fact that the power is very linear on this bike, and you don't have to wring its neck to get the best out of it. I also considered a used BMW 310 GS, but I felt like that bike wasn't off-road enough for me. So this was the compromise that I made. Also, the DR650 Suzuki is always in the running for a mid-sized adventure bike. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. I know people who have them and they swear by them. I put out a video about choosing a bike, and that was probably the most common one that people suggested. But for me, I needed to be realistic. You know, I'm 68, I'll be 69 this year. I need to be realistic about how I'm riding. I'm not the most adventurous rider, and I'm not the most skilled off-road. So I want a bike that just gets me to camping spots that maybe are a little bit off the beaten path, but not, I don't need a bike that, I'm not going to be the guy who's wheeling down a single track or leaping over fallen logs. That's just not in the cards for me. Let's talk about the on-road performance for this bike. The first trip I took was from BC's west coast into the interior along Highway 99, which is the Duffy Lake Road. And I found on that trip that the bike was quite capable of carrying me for hours, as well as passing big vehicles on steep uphills and managing the highway in all situations. So that was a really positive experience, and made me quite happy about having this bike. I also went down to Idaho and rode the Idaho BDR with a buddy, and we took the highway down there and we're working our way back along the BDR. So for the section from here to Idaho, I have to say that the bike performed quite well. We did have to ride on a lot of interstate highways. The only time I felt the bike had a shortcoming in power was on a long uphill, fully loaded. I couldn't get past a semi. It was probably a bad choice on my part to try and do that pass in that situation. Of course, a more powerful bike would have been able to do it just fine. So again, in some situations, maybe not enough power, but absolutely 99.9% of situations, I never had a lack of power. So the other thing I would talk about on road is the gas mileage. And on average, I'm going to look at my notes here. On average, my gas mileage was about 3.5 liters per 100 kilometers. That's 67 miles per gallon in the US. And my best was about 3 liters per 100 kilometers, and that's 78 miles per gallon in the US. And my worst, which happens like on that interstate when it's really cranked to keep it wide open for an hour, that's about 4.5 liters per 100 kilometers, or 52 miles per gallon. So if you really crank this bike out, you're going to get about 50 miles to the gallon. And of course, as a daily rider, that gas mileage, especially today, and gas prices are going up because of the war in Iran, I'm pretty happy that this is a very economical bike. So let's talk about the off-road performance on this bike. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to get the bike capable of doing off-road. The bike is far more capable of off-road than I am. You know, whatever I dream about getting a lighter, faster, more powerful bike, I'm not going to be able to use it. This bike does everything that I need it to do. Now, perhaps a lighter bike might be easier for me to handle off-road, but this bike was able to do everything. The first major thing that I did off-road was the 2025 Gold River Roadbook Rally, and that is a 3-day adventure navigation competition. I just followed the mapping route last year. I'm going to actually ride competitively this year. But, you know, that goes through quite a variety of terrains. Some is steep, some is bushy, a lot of it is just regular logging roads, and the bike performed fine. I had no problem with that. And then I went down with my buddy to ride the Idaho BDR, and the bike was quite adequate for that. Never had a problem with the bike. The only problem I had was my skill, and I had a fall which hurt my shoulder, and we decided that we weren't going to continue on the Idaho BDR route, but we would do some moto camping and work our way back to Canada. We actually ended up riding the last section of the Idaho BDR up to the Canadian border from Bonners Ferry, which is really just easy logging roads. You know, the one thing that I needed to change for this bike to be better off-road was to change the tires. So I put on these Shinkos, Shinko 804, 805, and that's never been a problem for me. These are 60/40 tires and have been quite adequate, never had a problem with them. You know, and then the only other thing, you know, for off-road is common to a lot of bikes is switching off the ABS. The ABS is switchable. You have to do it at the time you start the bike. You can't just pull over and do it. It may or may not work. Sometimes it seems to, but generally you have to remember to put the ABS off at the time you start the bike. So, but I actually found that the ABS was not very intrusive, and I often forgot to turn off the ABS, and I'd ride on logging roads without noticing a real problem. It's only the really steep places where I felt like I wanted to be sure that I had total control over the rear brake. Let's talk about the modifications that I've made to this bike. So I mentioned the tires. I got the Shinko E804, 805 tires. I bought those from Fort 9 in Canada. I'm going to mention where I got the parts from because finding parts for this bike was a little more challenging than I expected. As I said, these tires have been really great in all conditions. This little snaggle of wires is the Eastern Beaver power distribution module, and what it does is it hooks up to one of the switchable power sources, which I've done under the fuse box, and it allows me to have switchable power that I can run out to other accessories. So the accessories that I added were the I added my Garmin and my Garmin Zumo XT. I added a quad lock phone mount. I've been with quad lock for a little while. They do not sponsor me, but it's very handy. I did have auxiliary lights on, so I added a switch that I got from Fortnine. Yeah, so I got the rally seat here. Gives me more flexibility in my seating. I got Barkbuster handguards. I got these shorty levers. So shorty brake lever, shorty clutch lever. Oh, the Jivvy windscreen. This is what people ask me all the time about. So my windscreen is a Jivvy windscreen, and I really like that. I did meet a guy at the Sea to Sky show, Sea to Sky Motor Show, who said he had cut his down, right? Likes the width, right? Because it's way wider than the stock, but he didn't like the height, right? And I don't use this for my off-road. If you notice in some of my off-road videos, especially in Gold River and the Idaho BDR, I put on the Royal Enfield tall screen because I don't want to stand up with this facing me. I put in the K&N air filter and a modification that opens up the air box. I do have a video about the 5,000 kilometer service where I showed you taking off the tank. It's not that hard. It's really, some people, it's a deal breaker to have to remove the tank to get at the air filter, and I understand that, but having done it twice now, I would say that it's actually not too hard, and it's comparable to my Africa Twin, which required taking off the plastics. It came with one external power, and that's great, but I added a second one. So I added a second external power, and that allows me to, I put another charge port on the handlebars for when I'm riding, doing a camping trip and stuff, because, you know, some people said, you don't really need to have so many things charging, right? I got a couple of cameras and stuff, but I still have, you know, there's flashlights, there's an extra power pack, there's quite a few extra things that I want to charge. And even if I wasn't doing YouTube videos, I would probably still want to have an extra charger on the bike in addition to the one built in. If you watch my off-road stuff, I broke my mirror on my very first off-road adventure, so I replaced it with double take mirrors, which I probably would have done anyways. Double take mirrors, if you don't know, are attached with these balls. They bend out of the way. They're very flexible. Supposed to be unbreakable. Have seen them break, but it's quite hard to do. Also put on this shift lever, which flips up. That's going to be harder to bend in a crash situation, which I want to do. And then also means that I can just pack a spare shift lever in case I really go bad. There is a fold-up brake lever, but I don't have it yet. I removed the padding on the foot pegs right away, and I've never regretted that. I never feel like I want the padding on there. I don't have them on here. I got the Royal Enfield hard panniers. I did a review of those. I'm not too happy with those. And one of the reasons is I have the Jivvy box here on the back. This is one of the smaller ones, but one of the things I like about this is for commuting that it's nice and wide, and I can fit my whole briefcase in here or a backpack with a laptop in it, and that makes a big difference to me. This is the 33 liter. I bought this Jivvy luggage many years ago, and I just keep switching it from bike to bike to bike, so that's one of the reasons why I got it. I got the adapter from Hitchcock's. I got the Royal Enfield luggage mounting from Hitchcock's. I got the seat from Hitchcock's. I got the Barkbusters from Hitchcock's. Now Fortnine also sells the Barkbusters. Turns out that they're not specifically for the Royal Enfield, but I wanted to make sure they fit. So I got them from Hitchcock's because Hitchcock's has them listed as a Royal Enfield accessory, and Fortnine only has it as a universal accessory. So I wasn't sure that it was going to be the same one. Another modification that I made is to the side stand, and I put on, you probably can't see very well in this, I put on a side stand lowering kit that I got from Hitchcock's in England, and that changes the angle of the bike. I'll put up a couple of shots here. You can see it doesn't look like a big deal, to reduce the angle by just a few degrees, but the experience is it actually makes a big difference because, you know, it's a question of the torque and the distance, right? So the farther the bike is over, the heavier it is. So by reducing it by just a few degrees, then it's so much easier to get it upright when you're going, especially if you happen to park in a place where it's leaning downhill. And that can happen a lot around here. So I like that. The only problem I had was that when I installed the kit, the sensor switch for the side stand didn't have enough wiring to get into position. So I had to bypass the sensor switch, which a lot of people do anyways. So now there's no sensor switch. It's just like in the old days, like most of you guys are my age, you know that we used to just have side stands that you'd have to remember to kick up. And if you didn't, then you paid the price. So, so would I buy this bike again? Yes, but there are the bikes to look at and there are other options now. I bought this bike when it was just coming on the market and there was no room for negotiation. A year later, they're selling the last of the first generation. Maybe there's a new one coming, but anyways, my local dealer says they have one at $64.99 plus fees. So that's about $8,000. That's quite a bit less than I paid. Same bike. So you could get that if you're quick. BMW 450 I mentioned, it's not available yet. I actually talked to the BMW dealer this week and they're talking about getting it in a year. So that's a whole riding season. In fact, a year, maybe it's going to be longer, right? It's only just been released. And being here on the west coast of Canada, we seem to be one of the last places to get these bikes. KTM 390 now has a new version of an adventure bike. And that looks like a really great bike. Address some of the shortcomings of the previous generation. They're being advertised right now at $82.99 plus $1,600 prep. So that's a little bit more than $10K. So that's quite expensive. That's probably the most expensive one here. Oh, the Kawasaki KLE 500 SE is a two-cylinder bike. Very interesting. Also not available yet, but I think it will be available this year. I saw a sign for one at the Sea to Sky motorcycle show. Again, that's going to be $10,000 by the time you get it out the door. CRF 300L Rally, a little more powerful than the 250. Gives me the range I want. That's about 9,000 including fees at the Honda Center in just on the edge of Burnaby and Vancouver. Now I looked at the DR650, brand new DR650, $77.95 plus fees. So that's going to be like 8,500, almost 9,000, somewhere in that range by the time you get out the door. That's a pretty fair price, but there's a used one that's almost brand new. I think it's a 2023 version that's on sale on the local Craigslist for $59.50. So, you know, with the DRZ, you're going to have a market of used bikes to choose from. You should be able to find one. So if you're going to buy a used bike, watch my video about used bikes. You know, if your budget's tight, buying the latest and greatest bike for this year is probably not what you want to do. Buy the latest and greatest bike for last year or the year before and save yourself a few $1,000s that you can spend on accessories or you know, buying your wife something because she let you buy a bike. So that's my assessment of the Himalayan 450. I got a few things coming up. It's like a nice sunny day finally here. We're just getting spring looks like it might be starting. It's mid-March. It's actually the first day of spring today, and so there are things coming up. I was sent a tent to evaluate, so I'm going to do a camping trip, another March camping trip. Last year's didn't work out very well, but this year I think I learned a few things, so I'm going to do a March camping trip very soon. I'm going to do a little bit more training in off-road riding with the Pacific Riding School. That'll be in April, so I'll probably come out in May with a video on that. I'm also planning to try renting a bike from Cycle BC and just to do a different kind of bike. I was thinking about renting a BMW 1300 GS because that's a bike I'll never own, but I'd really love to ride one to see what it's like. At my age, buying a bigger bike is probably not the right thing to do. Although there's, you know, as I say with the road stuff, for road and travel, I could use a bigger bike. So It's not outside of my desires to have a bike that I can just do moto camping on without doing any serious off-road. And that may be the way to go, is to go to a bigger bike and to let off the off-road. I would miss going to Gold River. That's been a really great thing for me. You can still register for the 2026 Gold River Rally, and that is going to be July 1st to 6th. I'm not sponsored by Gold River Rally, but I do want to support them because it's a great event, and I've met a lot of great guys doing that, and women too. That is my evaluation of the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. Thanks for watching my video. If you're interested in the Himalayan 450, or you just want to stick with me, an older guy who's riding the hell out of life, then think about subscribing to my channel, like this video, and maybe watch whatever gets popped up on the screen after. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one.